what I've found over the years is that people tend to think of innovation as being all about taking risks, having breakthrough new ideas. They don't realise that innovation is also about sustaining that. So to sustain innovations and new ideas.
Welcome back to another episode of the Making Magic podcast. I'm Sean Jay, your host, and I'm a professional magician, speaker, and 3D designer. And this is all about inspiring conversations with the movers, the shakers, the visionaries, and the makers, the wizards behind the curtain that make the magic for you. Now, if this is your first time tuning into the show, thank you so much for doing so. It really does mean a lot to me because I put a lot of hard work into each and every one of these episodes. Whether you're listening to the sound of my voice on any one of the popular podcast apps or on YouTube, hopefully you'll decide, if you're a podcast type of person, that you'll follow the show. Follow me along for the ride and leave a healthy review of the show. And if you're here on YouTube, feel free to give this show a thumbs up, comment below, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. You guys know what to do because I'm all about getting your creative gears turning, and that's what this show is all about. Whether you feel like you're stuck with a certain thought pattern and you want to break out of your current thought pattern, if you feel boxed in and trying to be inspired to think in new ways, well, I've got some of the world's most creative people that are sharing their process with you on this show. So I hope you decide to join me on the journey, and I'll be releasing episodes like every week now, so I hope you guys are enjoying this stuff. So with all that being said, let's learn a little bit more about our next guest. Hey, Gaia, thank you so much for making time to be on the Making Magic podcast.
Thank you for having me here, Sean.
Yes, this is going to be a great chat. Now, you're a very multifaceted kind of person, and I just wanted to introduce you, just give a broad overview, and then we'll talk more about the specifics of who you are and what you do. But Gaia is, folks, for those of you listening and watching, she's a keynote speaker, an author, and a researcher, and she's done a lot of research, and she's collected a lot of data on the, correct me if I'm wrong, the innovation and leadership culture, company culture, innovation.
Yeah, how to create a culture that supports innovation and how to lead to support innovation.
Okay. And just a few highlights from your short list here. You've authored a number of books called The Innovation Race, How to Change a Culture to Change the Game, along with an international bestseller, Who Killed Creativity and How Can We Get It Back? So there's many other things we can discuss here, and also including work that you've done for, I read also with Nestle in Switzerland, and also with Google. You created a type of leadership program for Google, correct?
Yes, that's right. Worked with a number of multinational companies and other organizations around the world.
Awesome. Okay, so we got a lot to cover here. So I always like to start off the show with a story. So I'd like you, Gaia, to tell us a story about the very first thing that you've created. And I know I interview a lot of prop builders and artists, and this might not be a painting or a prop, but I know you are constantly creating things, whether it be data reports from research you've done, but you can take it from here and tell us about what is this first thing?
Sure. Well, I thought of my first story that I created that was publicized. And this was when I was only about 10 years old and my family had moved to England for a while. And I'm from Australia, so it was all the way around the other side of the world. I'd only been in the country about a month. I had to go to a new school. I was very shy. I was terrified of starting school. And in one of my first classes, the English teacher asked us to write a story. And I wrote a story about Christmas because it was coming up to Christmas time. And I I thought it was a great story. It was about a young, poor girl looking in the window of a wealthy family and wishing that she could be there with, she could have, a family to have Christmas with and have Christmas with all the trimmings and the presents and so on. And my teacher loved the story so much that he made me read it in front of the class, which was terrifying. And then he made me go around to all the other English classes and read it to them as well. Oh, and that was quite a traumatic experience for me. And yet somehow it gave me the confidence to realize, okay, maybe I do have a story to tell. Maybe I, do have some creative ideas and a way of engaging people that is original. And so I actually, after that, took up acting classes to feel more confident about presenting in front of people. So that very shy little girl has ended up, presenting keynotes in front of thousands of people and producing, books and educational resources and delivering, to CEOs around the world. Because of that one experience, I was able to take it further from there. I'll just add another story as well, and this was when my husband and I, who have ended up, we've been together for over 35 years, and we've worked together for most of that time, and we ended up wanting to create a resource for school students. We were teaching in schools at the time, and we visited a publisher and we looked into going to publishing with this publisher. But we decided that they wanted quite a bit of creative control. They were telling us how the book should be formatted. They had their own illustrators and so on. And we knew exactly what children liked and we knew what they responded to. So we felt we needed to step back from that and create our own book. And that we didn't know what we were getting ourselves in for, because it, was a huge task, and it involved, getting all our friends over into our garage, enticing them over with pizzas and Coke, and actually compiling the book together. So it was a huge responsibility, but we had great outcomes from that. We produced something that we were very proud of, and that ended up selling into schools all around the nation. And we ended up earning good royalties, annual royalties from that product. So it was that confidence sort of built into something that became productive and commercialized.
That's interesting, like how someone, right? So you said the original company wanted creative control, and then you decided it would be best done if you just did it yourself. And the crazy amount of the surprise twist was that you thought that by doing it yourself, it was going to be, well, it probably was harder, but the end results, the fruits of your labor, were probably 10 times more what you would have gotten, especially profit wise, because it was now your self publication rather than going through a roundabout with a company and getting the trickle. Wow. So does this mean you recommend people to do self-published rather than go with companies?
Look, there's pros and cons to everything. And that got us started with publishing. It gave us a really good hands-on experience. As I said, it was good income. We were fortunate enough to find a really well-connected distributor who was able to get it out to the schools. And so that work was done for us in the end. We didn't need to do much marketing. We'd sort of put out a few articles and do some interviews. And the word got out that this was a good resource to use. So we were very fortunate. But when I did want to start writing some books and distributing them to a bigger audience, to a broader audience, then I did want to try to get with a publisher. So that was the next step. And I was glad that I wasn't trying to produce and distribute a book that was going to a lot more people internationally.
It's a big undertaking to do it all yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. I think, been there, done that. It was a great experience, but I'm very happy to be going through a publisher now.
Got it. And what were the lessons that you learned from doing that initial project?
Oh, so many lessons. I learned that, people pitch in and help when you have this great idea and you have this passion, and people buy into that passion and become a part of it. But be careful that you don't push it too far, or you can lose a lot of friends. So, sometimes you've got to go it alone. Sometimes you can bring your friends and family with you. I learned that if you have an idea that will work in practice, like I was on the coalface and actually teaching young people, so I knew what they responded well to. And I knew that the publishers didn't understand that well enough. And so sometimes you have to really be confident about your ideas and be prepared to push them forward, even if people are saying, well, we're professionals, this is what we think. It's not always going to work, because they are professionals, they will have a better understanding of the market, or they might have a better understanding of how to produce a product that sells. Whatever it is, you have to still have a certain amount of humility about it. But you also want to really be clear about what you know and what value that can bring, and be prepared to persevere. So despite being very shy when I was young, I somehow had this great ability to push hard, push myself and push others. And I think that's what's got me to where I am today.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a lot to take in there, especially that's very inspiring for all of the introverts out there that feel like that's a disadvantage, but it can be a superpower. I've noticed that people who are shy and introverted generally are a lot more sensitive to things and pick up on more subtle things that others wouldn't. And so that can be very advantageous, especially, I would say, probably when you are doing that self-publishing thing, you are very sensitive to pick up on opportunities and maybe mistakes that you are correcting along the way due to that extreme level of honed in sensitivity, where others might have just blown past it and just, missed out on things, the big picture.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so valuable to get that hands-on experience and to understand every stage of a process like that. If you didn't, you wouldn't really appreciate the different elements that you can have input into and you can have some sort of oversight into. So, yeah, definitely worth it.
Okay. And knowing what you know right now, Gaia, is there any advice that you would give your younger self back when you were starting these creative endeavors that could have prevented you from making the mistakes that you made earlier on?
Well, I guess in a sense, it was a creative accident that I was thrown into the limelight before I felt ready. Okay. And I think young people should know you have a story to tell. Wherever you're coming from, whatever your experience, if you learn how to identify what is that narrative that is special and how can you communicate that narrative, it should help to really get you through life, because that's what life is about. It's about having a story and being able to pitch it well and being able to share it with others and bringing others along with you on that journey. So I was lucky in a sense that I was thrown into that situation where I discovered that hidden talent, and I could have known that when I was younger, I guess, and developed it earlier, perhaps.
Yeah, but you said you were just thrown into it, so I guess it was like a blessing in disguise. Like, I'm sure it was super overwhelming at first, coming from just where you are.
Like I said, I was terrified. I would be shaking. I was bright red. It was my worst nightmare.
Well, your worst became your best asset, and now here you are speaking. As your career. It's like, wow. It's like people. So that to all of the shy people watching and listening to this, there are possible ways that you can overcome this stuff. So be just like Gaia, just have an accidental happening that gives you no choice but to smile and talk to people and tell your story.
Yeah.
That's how I was. Like, I'm a performer. And when I first started, when I was 12 years old, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. I would, same symptoms you were describing. And it was like the only way I conquered that was to continuously get out there and do it over and over and over again. And the more you tell your story, the better you get at telling it, and the better you get at just conversing with people, because it's a matter of practice.
Yes. And I think a lot of people feel the same. I think some people assume that there are extroverts who just love the limelight and get out there, but there are very few people who are comfortable in the limelight. Most of us, I think, have to practice it and practice it and practice it until it becomes more comfortable. So I think everyone can do it if you have the right opportunities, if you pursue the right opportunities, and if you make sure you practice.
Exactly. Tell us now about something that you have recently made. And I know it could be a new discovery. It could be a new research project. I believe you have a new book, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
well,
tell us about
I will share then a research project, but I'll fill in a couple of the steps in between that first self-publishing experience and where I am now,
Sure.
just to take you on that journey.
Okay.
I actually, I wanted to do some research when I was younger, first married with my now husband, and I wanted to do some research into cultural practices internationally. And I said to my husband, I want to live in another country so I can spend time immersing myself in another culture and write about my experiences. So I moved him to Indonesia, and we lived there for a year while I was writing my book. And at the end of the year, we thought, this is pretty good. We're not ready to go home. Ended up staying there 13 years. Okay. But while I was there, I had to work out how to publish the book. So at the end of that year, I had a manuscript ready, came back to Australia and thought, where do you start? How do you get published? Found an author's guide, looked up the author's guide, and I was literally walking the streets back in the days when you had telephone boxes, public telephone boxes on the street. Walking the streets, I'd go to a telephone box and I'd start ringing the author's managers, and I had the courage to just ring people cold and say, I've got this book, are you interested? And after the third call, the guy said, yeah, I'm interested. Come in and show me. And I walked in off the street with my manuscript that I'd sort of put together myself, and got myself that the manager. And he was able to pitch it. It went to Random House, and I was able to get the book published. So once again, it's a story of just having the confidence in yourself and believing that you have a niche idea that meets a market need. And so I got published. From there, I published a second book through the same publisher. So I developed a relationship with them. And this book then was about the experience of running an international consulting business while we were living in Indonesia. So this was a few years further on. And I had this great idea. The publisher accepted it. By this stage, you had to do a lot of your own marketing. So they expected you to put in a lot of work into the PR. And they did a certain amount, but you were really expected to pull your weight as well. So I'd actually come up with this idea of a competition for people who bought the book. They might win a trip to Bali in Indonesia. And so I got sponsorship from the Four Seasons Hotel, which is a 4-star hotel. And then I got sponsorship from an airline, and I had this wonderful trip idea. And then there was the Bali bombings. So it was one of those things where I put everything into this book, and it was going to be big. I'd had some big interviews in TV programs in Australia with high exposure. It looked like it was going to do really well, and then it was just a whole different story after that. So it's, take a step at a time, keep persevering, see where that leads. So since then, I've worked also with Wiley. I've produced books on, you've mentioned the books on creative thinking and innovation. So that's what we specialise in our consultancy, my husband and I. an executive director still of that organisation, Tyrion, and so my book, The Innovation Race and Who Killed Creativity, they're all about how to develop that creative mindset, how to develop that creative confidence, and how to build a culture that supports innovation over the long term, so sustainable innovation, how to build your leadership principles and practices to ensure that it's not just one-off ideas, but it's really sustainable growth over the long term. So we published those books through Wiley. We've had really good PR, international sales, and published in several different languages and sold in. So we've kept receiving in the mail these books with different types of covers and different languages, and it was all very exciting. And that, of course, has then supported the growth of the business internationally. So we've worked, all throughout the world, in the Middle East, in Europe, in the US, across Asia Pacific, and that led me to deepening my work through the research. So I've gone a lot deeper into trying to understand principles and practices that support innovation. And that leads me to my latest, I guess, invention, which is an innovator profile. And what the innovator profile is it's about trying to identify what characteristics are required to support sustainable innovation. What I've found over the years is that people tend to think of innovation as being all about taking risks, having breakthrough new ideas. They don't realise that innovation is also about sustaining that. So to sustain innovations and new ideas, you also have to have incremental small developments. You have to be supporting systems and structures over the long term that are going to enable that change and that progress. And so it's called ambidexterity, this idea that you have to have both simultaneously. And so the profile that I've developed identifies, some of us are more of an explorer, which is what I call it. So we prefer change. We like, those to come up with those breakthrough new ideas. And we think of ourselves typically as innovators, creators, designers, makers. And then there are those who would be more of a preserver, which is my term. So that's someone who prefers that slow incremental growth and who's more interested in the details and the systems and the structures that are going to support that long-term change. And so it's identifying, are you more of an explorer, more of a preserver? What does that mean? And then breaking that down into the dimensions of what are the specific behaviours that we have that support each of those. So this profile has now gone out, to thousands and thousands internationally and has had some really interesting results. So I've identified, profiles of scientists who tend to be fairly ambidextrous because they have to be creative in their thinking, but they also have to be able to follow through and be rigorous in their methods. And they need to sort of follow through to the final inventions or the final solutions. Then you have executive directors of companies who tend to be very strong on the explorer dimension. So they're very much big picture, strategic, not looking at the details. On the other side, you'll have people in finance who tend to be very much on the preserver side. They're much more concerned about the details and getting those right. So this profile has really opened up a lot more opportunities to identify what goes on in the companies that we work with and how can we help individuals to identify their own biases, to identify their strengths, how to maximize their strengths, what gaps there might be, what areas, challenge areas they can develop, how to work with teams, because there can be strengths and challenge areas within the team or gaps. So how do you respect each other for the strengths you have? And then an organisation as a whole, I can also do a profile on an organisation and look at, what mode are you currently in? Are you in exploration mode? So I've looked at startups to scale-ups and, to more established organisations. Are you in preservation mode and are you resistant to change? So it's had applications at all different levels, and it's been a very exciting project.
That's fascinating. When you were telling me about this, like this is just a way of labeling, basically, to get clarity out of the ether that is these buzzwords, innovation and creativity. And it's when you say that to people don't really know really what that means or what to do with it. And it's kind of like, if you have it, you have it. But if you don't and you're seeking and you want to, it's like, well, what is this? And like, I remember years ago, I never majored in psychology, but I was always fascinated by it. And I read this book that I found in the library that broke down the Myers-Briggs personalities. And I was fascinated with that because it finally, gives you this clarity on, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this. And then you could figure out where you fall under. And once you figure that out, it exposes your strengths and weaknesses. And then you can learn how to balance from other types. Like if you're a one type, you're strong in these areas, but a little weak in these areas. And then you can, connect with other people that are leaning more towards the opposite way. So you can learn from their strengths to improve what you're lacking upon. So that kind of very similar to that, but in a way that helps, like you said, companies and discover ways that they can break out of their old patterns and recognize where do they fall on the scale. And based on that, then it helps them with their plan of action. That's great.
Absolutely. And I found that Myers-Briggs is very good, but quite complex. And a lot of people have trouble remembering their profile and applying the principles from the profile. And I thought it would be really helpful to distill it down to the basic elements. And these are principles that come from science. It's actual basic psychological principles that even the single-celled amoeba are drawn either towards danger and challenges or away from. So they have this basic drive to either face up to challenges or to avoid them, that sort of fight or flight. And so I broke it down to the very core element, which is this explorer preserver approach. And then I go into more detail from there if you want to know more about what that looks like in practice. So as an example, there's flexibility versus stability. So an explorer will enjoy flexibility and will be able to stretch themselves in different directions and come up with different ideas. Whereas a preserver is more likely to want that sort of the really stable base to work from. They don't want to take themselves too far out of their comfort zone. And if they do stretch out, then it needs to be very gradual and at a pace that they can cope with. So, I just found that this language is quite easy and people can use it at any time. You can be in a meeting and you can say, all right, we need to go into exploration mode. It's time for brainstorming. We've got to come up with some creative new ideas around this challenge. So let's go into brainstorming mode for 10 minutes. And then, okay, now we need to go into preservation mode. We've got a deadline. We've got to come up with a solution fast. Let's pull in the preservers, and can you help us to check the details? Can you help us to get to the finish line, whatever it is? So you could start using that language, and it really helps to work more effectively yourself. It helps you to work more effectively as a team and as an organisation. It can help you to really keep check of where you're up to, what you need to be doing next.
I think it helps with communication too, because if you're speaking with someone, if you're an explorer and you're speaking to a preserver, like then you're assuming that they are of the explorer mindset, then the preserver is going to be totally lost, and that's why it's helpful to recognize what category these people fall under, which is very, very, I guess that goes back to your research roots, because it's very like research. When you research things, you put things in categories and columns and labeling.
Well, I try not to categorize too much. So in a sense, it does go against the grain because there are so many nuances, and it's not as simple as one or the other. But that's, I think, why I like this idea of ambidexterity, because it's both simultaneously. We just tend to have preferences. We tend to have developed strengths in certain areas according to a combination of genetics and upbringing and educational experiences, etc. So it's a simplification of a very complex idea, but I think it helps us to simplify things sometimes, just so we've got that language and so we've got that common base, as long as we don't oversimplify. When I did the research, I actually interviewed over 70, it was almost 70 innovation leaders globally to identify, what were they saying about how they innovated effectively. And the best innovators always talked in these paradoxes, in terms of paradoxes. So they'd talk about playing with an idea and then commercializing it, all in the one sentence. And there you had that exploration, that playing concept, and commercialization was like the preservation part of it. So they, almost unanimously had this very clear language. They could think in both zones. And it's also like we talk about the right brain and the left brain. Again, we know that's a vast oversimplification of how the brain works. Yet it can help us to understand a little bit that we do have creative parts of the brain, and we do have parts of the brain that are more systematic and logical in their thinking. We have a corpus callosum that connects the two, and the best connected people are the most creative. So you've got your jazz musicians who are very disciplined, but they're also able to go off and improvise. You've got your dancers who have studied rigorously and know the formula for dancing, yet they're often able to improvise. Mathematicians too have a very rigorous approach to what they do, and yet to come up with the new theories, new ideas, they need to be able to play with those ideas. So this concept comes up over and over again. You see, the most creative, the most innovative people are able to express that. Once I'd interviewed innovation leaders, that's when I came up with this profile. I read the literature over 60 years. I identified that it's called creativogenic cultures, or cultures that support the most geniuses, actually have these elements. So they tended to be flexible, they tended to have a focus on freedom, so they tend to be democratic. And there was all of these elements that I sort of pulled out, and from reading all of the studies that have been done since the mid-1900s right through to now. And there's a clear path that there's this concept of ambidexterity that embraces those ambiguities and incorporates those ambiguities. And that's what I embedded into the profile measure. I then tested the profile measure with thousands of people, as I said, and came up with some pretty clear, interesting results. The innovator profile comes out with a very strong explorer preference, yet they're also very clear in the area of independent thinking. So they're not prone to groupthink. These are people who are able to sort of think outside the box, literally, and pursue these ideas and follow them through to implementation.
Wow, that is so cool. That is just so, like, it sheds light on, like I said, things that are pretty muddy water in most people's mind when they think of these concepts, and they don't even know where to start or how to even approach it or what to do with it. And this gives people something to do with it and to put into practice based on where they are. That's great. That's great. Now, with all of these things that you do, I mean, I'm just looking here, you're a coach, you're speaking, you do these trainings, you're an author. Which one of these hats, which one of these things, these skills that you have, do you say that you're best at, that you're like, that's your forte?
I guess I'm a jack of all trades, which is, both a benefit.
Right, you're ambidextrous, both in the explorer and the preserver.
I try to practice what I preach. I try to stretch myself in both directions. And, definitely becoming an academic has really stretched me. Like, I've always had creative ideas and dabbled in a lot of things. Yeah. But to become really rigorous in my approach, and more scientific in my approach, I had to really tap into my preserver side. So I tend to be more of an explorer, someone who loves going out and trying new things and doing new things. Yet I fit the innovative profile because I'm also very independent and also capable of following through. And that is also due to a great partnership I have with my husband, who's really good at follow through as well. So as a team, we both have creative ideas, we play with them. And then, typically one of us will push through, depends who's more passionate about that particular topic. So which hat would I say that I like wearing the most? I really like variety. And I love it that in my work, I've been able to write. I really enjoy writing, but I also really enjoy working with people. I love seeing the lights go on when people have an aha moment and they learn something new about themselves or their team, about the way they work. I love it when they come up after a workshop session and say, I've not only learned about the way I work, I've got something I can take home to my wife or husband. I've learned, something about my marriage and the ways I think and I act in general. So I love having that sort of impact on people's lives, that really personal contact. I love empowering them to make a difference themselves and find ways that they can contribute to society. I love the projects that I've worked on. So we've worked on a number of companies on projects that can really make a difference to the world. So sustainability projects on alleviating poverty. So I worked on a project in India a number of years ago, but I've continued on the board since then. And we actually worked with the education department and the health department of the state of Tamil Nadu to come up with a curriculum that was going to go into all of the schools to teach health and well-being. And it was such an important project. It's gone to 6 million children throughout India through the schools and over 60 million, I think, internationally through different countries. So it's been this huge benefit. So being able to bring together the creative thinking, the working with people, the delivery, the teaching, all of that into one place and feel like you're doing things that will make a difference to people's lives is very exciting. So I'm just very fortunate that in my role as a director of Tyrian, I can do all of those things. I can say I'm going to go. I'm invited to do keynotes. I can decide I'm going to write a book. I can decide which projects I'll work on, client projects, who I'll work with. And then in my role with the university, I also get to explore my more intellectual capabilities and see, how deep I can go in really supporting the work that we do.
So it sounds like you have a whole closet full of a variety of different hats that you just kind of all different colors, and you're just like, I'm feeling like red today. I
think it's a multicolor hat.
Yeah, it's one big rainbow color hat. Like, how about?
I don't think I differentiate because every day I'm sort of doing so many different things that I don't stop and say, right, today is going to be, occasionally when I've got to finish a writing project and I've got a deadline, then I'll say to everyone, all right, I'm going to lock myself away for this week and focus on writing. But it's very occasional that I get that luxury. I'm often, checking in the morning meetings, seeing what everyone's up to and making sure everything's covered. And then I might spend a bit of time writing. Then I might spend a bit of time preparing for a presentation, or I might spend a bit of time looking into my research data. And I love it. It's exhausting at times. But rather than me having to change jobs several times, I've just built all these different personas into the one job.
That is one way to never be bored with what you do. That's for sure.
That's why we've had this consulting company. It's over 25. It must be almost 30 years by now. And I still love the work. Yeah.
You are in a very fortunate position, Jaya, because most people, as you know, there's a lot of people out there that hate what they do. Every day, they spend such a large percentage of their life doing something that they hate and feeling like worthless, even though they might be getting paid, let's say, several $100,000 a year at their fancy corporate job. They just deep down inside, there's no intrinsic value to whatever they're doing. And it's nice that what you're doing not only is bringing value to many other people, but value to your own soul, which is what keeps you guys, both you and your husband, going at this for 25, 30 years, which is very commendable and inspirational. And I think people need to listen to that and just really let that sink in. Like, you know, you're a great example of someone who's found what you're good at, you know what you're good at, and you're saying, okay, I got these things in my tool belt, and how can I combine all these things to make this unit of my business that is Jaya? And that's awesome. So I would say, after everything that I've heard, your best one word description for you, you're like you're an educator, really, because you use writing for education, you use public speaking for education, you use workshops for education. You like you're in the education business. And
yeah, well, my primary degrees were education and psychology. So education, inspiring people, working with people, that's really what I'm about. And I've just happened to stumble across different media that I can use to share that message, whether, as you said, it's through the books, it's through the public speaking, it's through the research, it's all around education and inspiring people.
Exactly. Okay. So are there any techniques that you haven't, that you don't currently have in your arsenal that you're excited about learning this year or in the upcoming year?
Interesting question. Look, off the top of my head, I'm having trouble thinking of something, because every day I learn whatever I'm exposed to. So because I'm doing more work with the university at the moment, so I picked up some project work, and now I'm working more closely on helping to design units and deliver units of studies that teach young people these creative thinking skills, and give them the models and tools to work on challenges. So we work with industry partners and people in the community to identify, what is a particular challenge that needs to be addressed. And then I teach our students how to address that challenge. And they come up with pitches for the partners and recommendations and solutions. So they go through that whole design thinking process and innovation process to come back with creative ideas. And that's a very exciting way to apply all the principles that I've been using with corporates myself for years, and make sure the next generation is able to learn those skills and apply them. So, that's been a new stretch for me, working with the university more in that context, because and that came after COVID. So because we had been traveling so much in 2019 internationally with our work, so I think it was around 220 days out of the year in 2019 we were on the road. And then 2020, no travel, very little client work. Some of it shifted online, but it really dropped right back. And that's when the opportunity came. Somebody asked me if I could help out with some work at the university, and I thought, okay, why not? I've got the time now to think about something like that. So that has led me in a different direction. I'm learning a lot about how academia works and how the university system works, and that's all new to me. So every day is a challenge when you take yourself out of what you're familiar and comfortable with. And I haven't lost what I had, because we still do have that international work. And we also have licensing partners internationally. So because we've produced curriculum that is of value to a number of companies worldwide, we've been able to package that and sell it under license to other partners all around the world. So they're out delivering those programs, and we take royalties from those deliveries, and we train them. So we have a train-the-trainer process and so on. So that's another facet of what we do. But Yeah, I think it was when I had to pitch my proposal for a PhD, and this was later in life because I was so busy with the business for so many years that I didn't get the chance to sort of get back and finish my study. I was as nervous as I was when I was 10 years old in that school in London because I was right out of my comfort zone. And not months before I'd been delivering keynotes on a stage to thousands and thousands, but I was shaking when I had to deliver in front of about 4 academics in a panel. I was terrified that, this was a whole new area, and I was, having imposter syndrome that maybe I wasn't good enough, and maybe I pushed it too far this time, and I was going to get caught out with my confidence. But, somehow I got through that PhD, I got into the university, I got accepted, but it's like starting again in terms of learning a whole new system and culture and ways of working. And so it's good for me.
Imposter syndrome is very real, folks. And I think it's often a sign. Would you agree that it's often a sign that you might be exploring some big, exciting new territory for you because your body's trying to protect itself because it's so far removed from your comfort zone? But oftentimes that's where the magic happens, outside the comfort zone. And
yes. And I have, in my measure, it's a bit hard to just describe, but I have a graph where you can see the stretch on either side of a center line, how much of a stretch are you an explorer and how much on the preserver side. And my stretch is very long. I push myself very hard. And I talk about at the extreme, when you're at the boundary line, you're in danger of burnout. And it can be quite scary at times. You can think,
Yes.
Can I really cope with this? Am I really ready to do this? So you need to be careful because there are dangers at the extreme, just as there are dangers of not pushing yourself far enough, because then obviously you're not reaching your full potential, and you could really be underutilizing capabilities that you have. So yeah, there's no sort of easy, quick solution, easy way to do something. It's always going to be a learning experience, and it's always a lot of trial and error.
Sure. Tons of trial and error. Only the strong will survive. Most people give up. Most people, after that first slip and fall, they're like, nah, not for me, but not according to you. I love the, you said it's called a phone box where you guys are.
What do you call it?
Phone booth, I guess.
Phone booth. Yes, that's right.
Same thing, kind of, but it's a spot like this tall rectangular thing where people get in and they use a phone, right? Same thing?
Yeah. Maybe only people my age remember this thing.
Oh, no, I remember it. I remember they had them for ages. They may still have them in New York City. I remember when
they have a couple here in Sydney that you're allowed to make phone calls for free. So that's great. So you can call emergency services. But they recognise that everybody has mobile now. Nobody was going to be paying money to stand on the street.
Exactly.
Noisy spot and talk. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, no. This is all, like, everything that you've said has lessons that are applicable to the real world. As mentioned, from being shy and nervous and getting in the phone box and just saying, hey, check this out. This is what I got. You're interested? That's like bold, radical, like, just, I don't care. And this is going to happen. And this is how we're going to make it happen. Love that. And then expanding on that and realizing that, oh, I'm good at this thing and this thing and this thing. And then you add that to your tool set, you become a more well-rounded person. Then I would venture to guess that you've shared many successes with these book deals and what you're doing now with the consulting, but I'm sure things don't always go perfectly according to plan. I'm sure you've had, and this is my favorite question I ask all my guests, is there anything that happened along your journey that was like this big epic fail? Like it just blew up in your face and you thought it was going to be awesome and it just exploded to pieces, and that was just something that you couldn't foresee, and there it was.
Well, it's interesting because, yes, of course, there have been failures along the way, but I think my approach to life is so optimistic that I forget about them fast. I've sort of put them behind me, and I have to keep believing that as long as I keep going, there'll be another success. There'll be another success. Look, I'll give you one example I can think of where I went in to speak to a CEO group. It was actually a day-long workshop with CEOs to teach them about creative thinking and innovation. And I may have been a bit overconfident when I went into the room. And I actually had the most negative response I've ever had. And it put me off right at the beginning. It sort of put me off where these CEOs were really important people. And they'd sort of, what I didn't realize is they'd had someone speak about innovation like a month or two before, and the organizer hadn't told me this. If she'd told me this, I would have found out what they'd learned in that session to make sure I didn't repeat it, to make sure I built on it. Anyway, because I didn't know this, I just went ahead and delivered what I'd prepared. And the people in the room started checking out. So they went on their mobile phones, they'd go out of the room. You know, they were important people. They had important things to do. So when we got to the morning break time, I had to speak to the organizer, and I had to say, look, I can see this group's really disengaged and I'm not sure why. And I had to do a very quick pivot, try to work out how to salvage the situation and get them engaged for the afternoon. But it was one of those times, and I think to a certain extent I could salvage some of it, but in another sense it was too late. And once they're gone, they're gone. So it was a good learning experience for me by the end of the day, that you never assume what you've got is going to work, that you always do your homework. You're always very clear about who your audience are, your audience is, what they know, how you can best make sure that you're targeting what you're doing to meet their needs. And so it was a hard learning experience, but a reminder that you've never just made it. You're only as good as your last book, your last delivery session, your last idea, and you've got to keep reinventing, keep growing, keep learning.
Mm-hmm. The one that I've heard for performers is you're only as good as your last show. You know, you can get a standing ovation. Same thing with a speaker. You get a standing O one day, then the next day you go in, much smaller group, and they're all quiet. Same speech, same energy. It's like, what did I do wrong? It's just that's how it goes. That's how
it's one of those things that it's really exhilarating when you get it right, and it's crushing when you don't. Yep. And I've heard people say it's not the audience's fault, it's you. But I don't quite agree with that, because I know for a fact, and I've seen it myself, like I've done it, and I've seen other people. They have their A-list material, their A-list speech, the whatever it is, and you just know that on average it gets an amazing response, and then it's just like one day it doesn't, and the audience is quiet, or it's just kind of lacking. I think there are many factors. You can't put it down to, you might be having an off day, but they might be having an off day, or they might just not be the right audience for your material, or, there's multiple reasons.
True.
It may or may not go well, but each time you just got to reflect on it, look back and say, what can I learn from that? What can I do differently next time to keep improving?
Absolutely. And piggybacking off that last question, is there anything that you have ever created, but it was a result of an accident? Like it was something that you were involved in, just tinkering around with in the explorer mode, and then accidentally you discovered something, and then it turned out to be like this major success, and it's kind of stuck with you ever since, or it's been an offering of yours ever since?
It's interesting. I'll give you an example of the other way around first. It's something I was tinkering with that didn't work.
Okay.
And that, in terms of writing, I'd already written a series of non-fiction books, and I thought, maybe I can try fiction, and put together a proposal for a fiction book. Put my hand at more creative writing, and sent that to the publisher, and she said, no way. It's like, okay, all right, at least I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. So experimenting is good, but be aware not everything's going to be a success. And then I was thinking about like when I cook, I'm a very lazy cook. I don't have a lot of time, and I like the idea of cooking, and I like the idea of creating something. And even though I'm not an artist, cooking is a way of doing art that is more accessible to most of us. But because I'm a lazy cook, it means I'm a little bit creative. So if I don't have the right ingredients, I'm not going to go to the shops and buy them. I'll think of something else I can substitute. And probably 99 times out of 100, it's pretty horrible, the result. But every so often, maybe one time out of 100, I'll do something and I go, actually, that's nicer than the original. And, so it's just that playing with things, experimenting, giving yourself, not just sticking to the formula, but giving yourself the freedom to experiment a bit, and you might come up with something that works really well. So I do that in my writing too. I do know a formula now that works, and I can do that quite easily. But every so often I think, oh, look, maybe I'll just try pitching this a bit differently or framing it a bit differently, and it really helps me to learn and grow.
Okay. Now, being that we kind of know that you're really an educator in every sense of the word with these multifaceted things that you do, was there any particular person that inspired you to get deep into the industry that you're in?
I would say that's my husband, because, together we inspired each other. And it was only because we had that support. So we've been in partnership in business, in marriage and in business over 25, 30 years. And nice. So I was not someone who necessarily had an idol or had someone they really looked up to and wanted to become. Okay. I was more sort of down to earth and practical than that, I think. And yes, I definitely learnt from reading ideas from other people. So, there are inspiring theorists, but with my husband, I was able to discuss and work through a number of ideas, and we were able to learn and grow together. And that was more inspiring for me.
Nice to have a significant other that you're with 24/7, providing inspiration and ideas and support.
And look, to be fair, it's not always positive at all. There's times when those differences are really grating and annoying. And yet, I think because what we teach, we are aware of those differences, and we have to sort of stop ourselves and reflect and respect the other person and say, all right, that's who they are. I need to respect that that's the position they're taking, and I need to listen to them and take it on board. So you do learn a lot of humility in the process. But definitely not always easy. There's a lot of sparks, but sometimes it's through that fission that you get the most creative ideas and the best ideas.
Was there a what that inspired you to get into this education, research, innovation? Was there any driving factor?
That's an interesting question. I think it's always been the passion for working with people, inspiring people, and seeing change, positive transformation and change. It's always been about that. And as soon as I felt if I was going a bit off focus, so it was never about the money. And sometimes I felt like we were feeding the beast a bit. We'd created this huge international company, and not necessarily in size of employees, but in terms of reach. We're trying to reach all these different countries and regions around the world. And sometimes I felt like we were serving the beast, like I said, and everything was about, trying to make sure that was sustainable and profitable. And we opened up offices in some different countries, and it was very stressful trying to manage people and work with the local processes and understand the cultures. And in the end, we ended up sort of minimizing everything again and closing down some of those offices and saying it's just not enjoyable. We want to enjoy what we do. We enjoy working with people. We enjoy seeing that transformation in people. And it's not about the company itself. It's about what we do and why we do it. And so we wanted to get back to that. So we wanted to get more out doing the deliveries ourselves, doing the consulting, the coaching, and just to be on the road connecting with people.
Yeah, it comes off as more authentic that way and less prepackaged, because you're got your hands right steeped in it.
Exactly. And yeah, that's what inspired us. So we'd had people say to us, what's your vision in 5 years' time? Are you going to grow and sell the company? And we actually looked into selling the company. We travelled again to England to meet a potential buyer. And the potential buyer started telling us, well, when I buy your company, I'm going to set you marketing goals for different regions, and you'll need to be around for the next 10 years and to do this and this and this. And he talked about how he was going to go off to an island and live and semi-retire. And we walked away from that meeting going, hang on, we're already happy. We're actually living on an island. We've got the level of enjoyment that we like from running our own company. We don't need to be big. We don't need all that money. We'd rather just do our own way. So again, we walked away from an opportunity because we wanted the creative ownership and we wanted the enjoyment out of what we were doing. And we never were strategic about saying in 5 years' time, we want to be making this much. We want to have grown to this amount. It was all about, are we enjoying this? Are we making a difference? And as long as we could answer those questions at the end of each year, then, we'd consider what we wanted to do for the following year. So it's very, step-by-step organic growth. And it's always been about what we can sustain and what's worth doing.
And I'm sure people and your clients can feel that too, that it's coming from a good place, because to make that kind of sacrifice, to me, really just shows like that, yeah, money's important, but if this is something that we're going to be doing, this is something that we have to take some satisfaction in, rather than just like this robotic step-by-step. Step 1, build it. Step 2, market it. And step 3, sell it and get rid of it and move on to the next. It's more like it's who you guys are. Yeah. Yeah.
And people know that. They know, yeah. And we were never trained in sales. And yet, the very first time we set up our consulting company, we walked into a meeting and we were actually trying to sell a team development session to a big Australian bank, a huge national bank. And we were nervous about it because while we'd done a lot of educational experiences, this was a new context for us. But we built this brochure and we decided what we thought would be appropriate. Walked into the meeting and walked out of that meeting, and we were so confident and so passionate about what we do that we had 3 keynote presentations, 17 workshops, 3 team development sessions. We had to fly people in internationally to deliver this program. The program ran for a week. It was huge. So our passion is what has made us good at our sales and has made what we do attractive to other people. We didn't need to learn the skills, and we just needed to radiate that enthusiasm, I think.
Yes, and I was going to just add to that the people that when they talk about sales and selling, I've keep coming across this concept, and it's really important for people to understand. It's not like you have a product to sell that you're just pushing people or arm wrestling people into buying, because nobody wants that, and that's your typical salesy stuff that everybody hates. It's not, you genuinely have a passion for what you do, and the product is so compelling based on your passion, based on your research, I'm sure that you present, and the results, that it kind of sells itself in the sense that you're very clear about what you're offering and you're very passionate about it. And here's all this proof of why it works. And so basically it's kind of like if anybody's resonating with that, well, then that you're already probably 3/4 of the way done with the sale, because it's just a matter of saying, yeah, I'm going to sign here. But prior to that, it's kind of like you're just, again, educating people. You're using your educator specialty and just saying, here's the clearest way I'm presenting to you this information. Here's why it works, and here's how it can help you. And you're obviously presenting something that's genuinely helpful to the right people, rather than selling people something that they don't need. But you're not really selling at all. You're helping and educating.
Yeah, I just share what I love, basically.
That's awesome.
I find that process quite easy. And again, I had the confidence to walk into, C-level meetings and pitch ideas and deliver coaching to executives. And again, that young, shy girl would never have imagined this. And it wasn't like I said, here's the goal that I want to achieve by the time I'm 20, 30, 40, whatever. It was just pushing the boundaries, seeing what you're capable of, keep going, and then you end up, achieving more than you probably would have expected or known you could achieve.
Yes, and I'm willing to bet you said the same thing that I said to myself when I was 12 years old, starting what I did, terrified to be in front of people. It's like I said to myself, Sean, if you don't do this, you might as well forget the business that you're in. If you want to be in the business that you're in, you got to figure out some way to talk to these people. You got to. And so I'm sure it was the same with you. Like, you say, I've got this great idea. I've got this great program. I'm terrified of telling people about it. But if I say nothing, then nothing's going to happen. So let's see what happens. Let me just try it, right?
Yep, it's the only way to do it.
Try or die. Exactly. Okay. Finally, lastly, is there anyone that you look up to in the space that you're in the space of innovation, in the space of corporate culture and change?
Well, I think Clayton Christensen was an innovator in the area of innovation. In that his book, The Innovator's Dilemma, he talks about how innovation itself is disruptive. So, and the biggest, most established companies were caught off guard by technology coming in and these new competitors coming in and competing at a level that they hadn't imagined was possible. And so innovation is about understanding that disruption and making sure that you're ready for it. And that's all about what I've been talking about, that exploration and preservation. So being ambidextrous, making sure you're looking ahead to the horizon, seeing what's the next new thing, what's coming up in the future, how can we prepare for that, as well as what's happening right now that we need to hang on to, what do we need to continue doing well, and how can we consolidate those two things? How can we ensure that we're pursuing both simultaneously? So I think he sort of triggered some thinking around that for me and helped me to think beyond, just innovation is the next best invention and that's it. But there's a lot more to it.
Beyond that, yeah. Are there any other resources that you would recommend besides Clayton's book and yours, of course?
We've developed some canvases, which are like, they're like the business model canvas. So they're collaborator canvases, and they're designed for people to get together with as an individual or to get together with their teams and to use it as a tool for capturing the information about how they can work together in particular areas, and then to ensure they're thinking systematically and logically about how to approach a particular situation. So it brings in these ideas of creative thinking and innovation. How do you approach that as a team and make sure you're all on the same page, in a sense? So that's just a practical tool that we've developed that we think would be really useful for people. And then, of course, the books that I've mentioned, the programs that we sell under license. In terms of other people's material,
I actually haven't thought. I've been immersed in my own stuff for so long that I haven't been using other people's material. But there's lots of good stuff out there. There really is. You just look up creative thinking and innovation, and there's loads and loads and loads of things that are out there, and a lot of it is very good.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Well, Jaya, this has been an amazing chat, a mind-expanding chat, and I'd like to just leave the floor open to you to let us know clearly where my listeners and viewers can find out more about Jaya Grant and what you do.
Sure. Well, probably the easiest place to go, I do have a few websites, but the easiest place, now we've been talking about innovation in this chat, is theinnovationrace.com, but it's the-innovation-race.com. And you'll find out there's more about me, there's more about the books that I've been talking about, the canvases that I've been talking about, the licensing. My company is called Tirian, TIRIAN.com, and that will also take you to the programs that we run, which are all designed to bring organisation innovation through transformation.
Transformation. That is
a key word.
That is, that's one of the key words why you're on the Making Magic podcast, because transformation is magic. Magic is transformation. It's taking something, turning it into something else entirely. It's alchemy, taking the lead and turning it into the gold. And that's why we're sitting here having this chat right now. And
nice segue.
Yeah, I'm good at the segue thing, and it's my job. So, Jaya, it's been an absolute blast chatting with you on the. Pretty much, you are like, I guess, on the other side of the globe, or for the most part.
Literally.
Yeah. Sitting there in Australia. Here I am on the East Coast in North Carolina. Well, this has been awesome. Well, thank you so much again for sharing your story, your message, and your passion with my audience.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Sean. It's been really enjoyable.
Absolutely. And you guys have been watching and listening to another episode of the Making Magic podcast. If you're listening to the sound of our voices on any one of the popular podcast apps, feel free to follow me along in the show. Follow the show, drop a nice review, share your comments. We always love to hear your feedback. And if you're watching this video interview on YouTube, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. You know what to do. I don't even have to say this, but I do anyways, just as a little reminder. Hope you guys are getting value out of this. So thank you again, Jaya Grant. I'm Sean J., and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.